the cheese doesn't care what I look like. The bread aisle doesn't care what I look like.
Oh, the French cheese does care.
Okay, maybe you're right. So I was like telling my friends, like, what, like, do you think, like, are we dating? And they were like, yes, that's your boyfriend. And I was like, oh, okay.
What is the single overhyped French stereotype that, if you could, you'd like to get rid of?
Let me think. Oh, there are so many.
Hi everyone and welcome back to Expat. Today's guest is a brilliant cultural and language content creator who has built almost 1 million followers by making us laugh at the absurd but beautiful differences between our worlds. From the halls of the US Senate to the streets of Nantes, my birthplace, she speaks 4 languages, has explored nearly 30 countries, I think, and uses a background in musical theater to create some of the sharpest cultural commentary on the internet. She is the wit, the mind, and the energy behind Roya Adventura. Roya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, yeah, a very peculiar story because that got my attention. Usually, when Americans move to France, they're like Paris, Nice. No, not you.
No.
So Nantes, which is the place I was born, by the way. So.
Yes, which is so cool. I love meeting people from Nantes because it is just such a great city.
So why Nantes?
Well, a bit of a long story, but the long and the short of it is that I did an exchange when I was 15 with a girl from Nantes, or juste à côté, Saint-Sébastien-sur-Loire, if we're being specific. And yeah, my French teacher in my freshman year of high school just came up to the class one day and said, does anyone here want to host a French student? And my hand just shot up immediately, and I said, yes, me, please. And she said, okay, great, you know, calm down. It's okay, it'll happen. And then actually, I went and stayed with her for a summer when I was 15. I ended up moving to Nantes and living with her. And she's still one of my best friends to this day. I went to her wedding last summer, and I'm going to see her tonight for dinner. So it's great, and that's what brought me to Nantes. And I just fell in love with it from there.
That's nice. I think. So you just mentioned you were 15.
Yes.
You moved there in 2012, I think.
Yes.
How did you survive? Starbucks were not even there.
No. So when I was there, when I was 15, it was just for the summer. And then when I moved in 2012, yeah, there was still no Starbucks. I actually think this was like such a golden period to be in France too, because it felt a little bit like pre-globalization. Like, I know globalization is an ongoing process that has been going on for many years, but there were so many things that if you weren't in Paris, you just wouldn't have the American chain there, right? So in Nantes at that time, there was no Starbucks, there was no, like, there might have been one McDonald's or something, but now it's like, I can tell the changes that have happened in Nantes by the way that some sort of like global American chains have moved in. And so it was really special being there at this time and really being fully immersed in French culture.
It's funny because when you talk about this, and especially the first time you experienced France, obviously was as a tourist. And often I heard you talk about how American, when they travel, especially when they travel, they're kind of stuck in their own bubble.
Yeah.
What do you mean about that?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily specifically Americans. I think a lot of times it's especially within English speakers and people living abroad, but definitely it happens to Americans too, right? So often people who live and study abroad, especially when it's something shorter, like just a semester or something, and you come over with a group, you end up staying with that group. And if you don't speak the language yet, then of course you're going to fall back into speaking English together. This happened a little bit to me when I lived in Spain, because even though I wasn't really around Americans, the common language between all the people that I was with was English. And so while I spoke some Spanish and I was learning Spanish, there was a lot of people that I knew and that I met. They might have been from Cyprus or Germany or Poland, and then we would all speak English together. And what happens is people tend to just not learn the language as quickly, and then learning the culture takes more time too, because there's so much that's lost in translation. There are so many things that you don't pick up on, or it takes longer to get those things until you're fully fluent and fully immersed in that way.
And you do understand all of those accents. For me, that would be a lot harder, because like the guys from Malta, for example, they do speak English, but it's harder to understand for me.
Yeah.
when you're not a native, it's also...
Yes, I think it depends on what type of English dialect. Like, for example, I think I understand like almost all dialects of English, and most foreigners speaking English, except Scottish people. Like, I have such a hard time understanding Scottish people. I'm like, really have to focus. And actually, when I moved to Nantes, my French friend there brought me to see a movie, and it was a Scottish movie, and it just was subtitled in French, and I was reading the French subtitles more than I was listening to the Scottish people speak, because I just couldn't really understand it.
But would you understand then the Texan better? Because for me, it's actually easier to understand the Scots, because there are some words that have French origins in the language or dialect. But like Texan, it's like, whoa.
Oh yeah, I think pretty much every American accent, because I'm so used to it, that's where I'm from, right? And I know a lot of people from all over the country. And so there's actually, I don't remember the exact study, but there was a study that I read several years ago that was talking about it's actually easier for people to learn to understand accents than it is to perfect your own accent. And that the study was showing that you can train yourself to understand various accents even within one language. And so I think that's part of it too. It's familiarity. It's like getting used to it. If that's what you're exposed to, it's normal that if you're not around a Texan all the time and it's this southern drawl that the words are kind of smushed together, you might not understand.
Yeah, no. Well, for me, actually, the hardest accent would be the Irish.
Irish? Oh, yeah. Really? Okay. Yeah.
This is the strongest. I mean, my opinion.
Yeah, totally.
I think you've shared this as well, the fact that I'm tempted to say that the French kind of seemingly love Americans. And I'm heavily biased. I love Americans, and all of my friends love Americans. But I'm like, is this the experience you've had? Like, the French really like American in general, and like the minute they understand, because like we're not good with accents, especially English accent. The minute they realize like you're not British but you're American, they're kind of drawn towards you.
Yeah, I would say I've actually had a really good experience. I think sometimes there's this sort of dialogue online that is really negative towards Americans. And I think that kind of represents often like a very small percentage of people in real life. And in general, my experience in France has been really positive. And of course, I think it's a little bit selection bias. Like, the people who are going to be around me that I'm going to know, they're going to be people who like Americans because I'm American. The people who don't aren't going to talk to me, right? But like, for example, when I lived in Nantes, my friend's stepdad, he drove this big truck because he worked for like a brocante. Why am I forgetting the word? Anyway, like a secondhand shop.
You're the native.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know. And he in his truck had just like a big American flag draped behind him where he would sit. And my friends, like, I would bring them American flags. I would bring them American things. I brought them like red Solo cup sets so that they could play beer pong. And even when I left, you know. And they really loved and embraced American culture. And I think it's because, in part, we are so ubiquitous, like from a pop culture perspective. There are so many like American movies and TV shows that are watched all over the world. You have American music that plays in cafes and when you go to the club. And it's not that English, like from England, English people aren't as prominent, because there's quite a lot of cultural prominence from the UK as well. But there's a much more contentious history with England. And so all of the centuries of like fighting, I think might contribute a little bit more to that sort of antagonism that you see more between the British and French, as well as, you know, we have a history of allyship between the US and France. And in fact, France helped us defeat the British. Speaking of which, it's the America 250 this year, just coming up soon, the 250th anniversary, that, you know, France helped the US quite a lot. And
usually people don't know, I mean, we're being taught that in France, but it's actually what bankrupted France back then, like Louis the 16th, and basically lost his head because of that, because he invested so much into helping the US that he kind of bankrupted France. And so, well, they had to find money, and they tried to obviously raise taxes at the time. Well, That still doesn't work, but like we no longer decapitate people, I think.
Well, I'm going to say sorry about the bankruptcy on behalf of all Americans. But I feel like it was for the better. I feel like the French loved the French Revolution and kicking out all of the aristocracy and having a democracy. So hopefully it was all for the better anyway.
I think, and that was bound to happen anyway. So,
Yeah.
There's a lot of cultural differences. We were actually talking about that before we start shooting this. And one of those is about, let's say, intimacy, like talking about reproductive or sexual health in the US is kind of like taboo.
Yeah.
Like you were actually surprised that in France it's like, well, we talk about this or like the next meal we're going to have as if it's nothing.
Yeah, when I first moved to France, that was something that really surprised me, is how openly a lot of my friends would talk about birth control. Like, we would be at a party with friends, mixed gender, and my friend's like alarm on her phone would go off, and then she'd loudly be like, "I'm taking my birth control," and I was like, "Oh my God, you would say that in a room full of men? Like, that's crazy." And again, you know, I was younger too, so maybe I would be a little like I wouldn't be quite as discreet now, but still, like, I can't imagine just like announcing that to the room. And I remember my friends just being like, "Oh yeah, that's totally normal. Like, why would I not say that? Also, why would I not be on birth control? Like, this is a completely normal thing." And I really appreciated how open people were about talking about things like that, because it felt sort of taboo and more hush hush. Like, and I even grew up in a very, like, I would say, like, liberal and open area, and it was still very much like that.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it's on the flip side, but like contrary to this, it seems like we also more, I mean, we judge. The French judge based on how you look a lot more. So based on your appearance and how you dress or didn't dress up, actually.
Yeah.
And we were talking with like Anthony, who's behind the scene too, about this. Like the way you look, like literally the way you dressed. When I was a kid, my grandparents, for example, would not let me out of the house if I was not properly dressed.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
So I think there's a lot of cultural pressure on that. And that's also something that kind of shocked you, but maybe the other way.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just from like, if I'm in the US and I need to go to the grocery store, there's like no reason I can think of that I would need to dress to impress anyone. Like, the cheese doesn't care what I look like. The bread aisle doesn't care what I look like.
Oh, the French cheese does care.
Okay, maybe you're right with that one. Yeah. But so I was just used to, you know, wearing athleisure, sweatpants, whatever, sweatshirt, my hair in a bun like this, my makeup could be smeared across my face, I don't care. I'm just going to the grocery store. Meanwhile, I moved to Nantes, and I remember the first time I went to the grocery store in just sweats because I thought it was like a normal thing to do. I never did it ever again because the looks that I was getting in the grocery store, I was like, whoa.
Like looking like upside down or something.
Yes. And then I would also have friends that would comment on my outfits too, like what I was wearing. And I don't think they meant anything by it, but like just more than I would be used to, like, you know, "Oh, are you sure you're going to wear those shoes? Are you sure you want to wear those tights?" You know what I mean? Like, are you sure you're going to go outside without tights? Like, as if tights do much. Like, it's not really like, it was almost like there was this view of how I should dress that was more conservative in France. So on one side, in terms of talking about birth control or like reproductive health, people were so much more open. But when it came to dressing a certain way, I felt like it was much more conservative. Whereas like in the US, I could wear short shorts and a short skirt and, you know, a crop top, and which I think are a little bit more popular in France now anyway. But French women tend to wear a lot longer things and dress like a bit more conservatively, and there's more judgment towards women in that way, whereas there's openings in others.
Yeah, and you're right. We kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with this one, but like we kind of living in that video game on Roblox, like Dress to Impress.
Oh no, I haven't played. I'm sorry.
No, but well, my daughter is playing this game. That's one. So France is kind of Dress to Impress. Yeah.
Totally.
So there's like, you kind of touched base. We're talking about dressing, but the dating scene is also kind of different. Like in France,
so different.
It's kind of like first kiss means you're exclusive now, and like you're together. Well, I don't know about the US. Is that very different from the US?
Completely different. Like, to me, you have to specifically ask or agree that you are exclusive or in a relationship, or you like lay it out very clearly what you are to each other.
Did you have issues with that in France?
Yes, like a few times.
Okay.
But basically, I had like two boyfriends, not at the same time. This was like 6 months apart. I've talked about this story a little bit before, and people are like, at the same time, you had two boyfriends at the same time. I'm like, no, at least there's that. But yeah, I like this one guy that I was spending a lot of time with, basically kind of got the wrong idea, and he called me his girlfriend, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm not your girlfriend. Yeah, it didn't go very well. No, I was like, what are you talking about? But he had never asked, he had never said anything, and to me, like, that was clear, like, and so I actually thought it was like very weird for him to assume, because at the time I was so new to France, like I just didn't realize that that was a different cultural expectation. And then as I lived there longer, I sort of caught on that this was just a different culture. And so there's this other guy who I really liked and I was spending a lot of time with. So I was like telling my friends, like, what, like, do you think, like, are we dating? And they were like, yes, that's your boyfriend. And I was like, oh, okay, like, that's news to me, but how can I be sure? And they were like, well, okay, if you really want, you can ask him, like, what am I to you? And so I asked him, because I had to know as an American. I'm like, wow. I need you to tell me in words that you're my boyfriend. And then he was just like, yeah, you're my girlfriend. Why? Like, what? He just thought, I don't think he thought I was too weird for asking, but he was kind of confused probably. Like, why does this need to be said? So yeah, it's very different.
Well, it's funny you mentioned like confusion and stuff, because I don't know if it works both ways, but I know most, teenage boys or French men, at least, the younger ones, it's kind of like we see American girls as kind of like the ultimate fantasy, because we think you're more forward compared to French women.
Interesting.
And I've seen a few videos of you mentioning
in what
that.
Way?
Well, you can ask a guy out, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
And like that would pretty much never happen. I mean, it does occasionally, but like, it's not the etiquette around. So usually people would wait, like the women would wait for the men to ask her out. And so, and like obviously as men, we love that.
Yeah,
So
I think there's a couple of things going on. Like, one is, asking, we tend to just ask these questions directly, so you're going to be asked more. Though in the US, I would say there's still typically an expectation that the man will ask the woman out, for example, but women still do it, and that's great too. So it probably is happening more often than in France for that reason. But then, like, the other part of it too is, I think I've heard from a lot of French people that they see Americans in general, and not just in dating, but as being really confident. Because we talk to strangers really easily.
Right. Yes.
So we have this culture where we're like happy to just meet someone on the street. And of course, it depends in the United States too. So like New York is maybe a little bit less prone to like meeting people on the street or talking to someone randomly. But then like compared to the Midwest or the South, like if you're in the South or the Midwest and you like leave your house, you could be talking to like 30 people when you're outside for like 5 minutes. You know what I mean? So it even varies within the US. But what I find so funny is that like Americans who don't live in New York, who go to New York, tend to find New Yorkers to be sort of cold. But then French people who go to New York think New Yorkers are the friendliest people in the world and are talking their ear off. So it just shows you how all of this is like culturally relative, right?
But I'm biased, but I and my friends, we do think that they're more friendly, at least up front. Yes. They seem more friendly. I don't know, like deep down, obviously I didn't do a study, and we're generalizing, so there's probably going to be exceptions. It makes me think, we talked about this off camera, but I think it's relevant to talk about this now. Like one of the main cultural differences about the expectation around, for example, customer service.
Yes.
And like the anecdote I shared about this baker where like the American clients walked in and like, I don't know what was the argument, I didn't see the start, but at some point, the American client was like, oh, well, that wouldn't be like that in the US. In the US, customer is king. And like the French baker completely unapologetically said, yeah, but in France, we decapitate the king. So it shows very different angles.
Yeah, that's such a good example. I mean, if you try to depict like French versus American customer service in one anecdote, for me, that's it. I'll give another example though, because I used to work in customer service. I've worked like a ton of different food service jobs, and I remember.
France?
No, not in France, in the US. So, in speaking about American culture, which I think will probably be pretty shocking to you, I was working at this smoothie chain in high school. And when I was being trained for the job, they were teaching me, because you're literally taught that the customer is king as an employee. Okay. So it's part of your training when you start working somewhere. So we were being taught and talking about how the customer is king and how you should, treat customers and that they're always right. That's the other thing that is said often. It's not just the customer is king, but the customer is always right. And my manager gave an example. And again, like I said, I was working at a smoothie shop, and he said, Roya, if a customer comes up to you and dumps a smoothie on your shirt, what are you going to say? And I was like, I don't know. I don't even remember what I said in the moment. But he said, no, what you're going to say is you're going to say, I'm so sorry for spilling your smoothie. Let me get you a new one.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy. That is so crazy, which, I didn't spill the smoothie. Yeah, it's way too far. And I don't think every single place that you're going to work is going to be like that. But just to show how ingrained that sort of apologetic behavior is, even if you're not at fault, there's this sort of like hierarchy that's like that's very stark between like a customer and the worker.
So, but obviously someone from the US who visits France.
Yeah.
And then experience this completely different customer service.
Completely.
And he's not going to be treated like a king.
Yes.
So would you say it is correct to think that French customer service is bad, or?
No, I don't think French customer service is bad. I think that, anyone who travels to another country needs to just accept that they're in a different culture and things are going to be treated differently. So I think in talking about things that Americans bump up against in France and may perceive to be bad customer service that really aren't are, for example, in the US, there's this pressure to like turn around tables at a restaurant. Like you don't even stay that long. And so because of that, waiters move really quickly. Like as soon as you sit down, there's water on the table. They could take your order. They can get your stuff out. They're trying to get their food out as fast as possible. And that's just not the expectation in France, because you may be there for 2 or 3 hours. So the waiter doesn't need to come over immediately and, immediately take your order and spin around the table and get the food out as soon as possible. And so an American might think, oh, that's bad customer service, because why is the waiter not here, And so there's lots of little things like that that I think add up. But I don't actually think French customer service is bad. It's just like a different expectation. And when something's different, it doesn't make it bad necessarily.
Yeah, and like you were saying, I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but they don't pretend, like the waiters, for example, they may be having a bad day.
Yes.
They won't pretend like that they like you if they don't. Which, well, it's obviously it may come across as rude, but it's just sometimes they're just having a bad day.
Yeah.
They're going to try to be serviceable. I don't know if that's the right word.
I don't know.
But they're going to try. But what I'm saying is they will let you take your time. Like it's your table or it's your seat, and unless you call for them, they think. I remember even in busy places like Angelina or Carrette in Paris, where like there's a queue in front of the restaurant. Yeah. They didn't push me out.
And I think that's a great example too of like what is good French customer service. The idea isn't that you're out of there as fast as possible. The idea is that it's respectful and good service to let you enjoy yourself and not be bothered. So I think, again, it just comes from a different place. It's like a different philosophy. But then it leads to misunderstandings, even if the intention behind it is good.
Well, I think it is, but like, again, disclosure, I'm heavily biased. Obviously, I'm French, so... well, you've been in both cities. Would you say, well, I'm being cheeky here, Nantes or Paris for the ultimate French experience?
I mean, Nantes. And I know that's really controversial and like crazy, and people always disagree with me. But here's why I think it's the ultimate French experience. And that's because, yes, well, like Paris is iconic. Even French people say Paris is not France, right?
Like, usually the French agree that pretty much everyone that doesn't live in Paris doesn't like the Parisian. Yeah.
And I was just in Nice, for example, like a couple of days ago, and people over and over again were like, oh, don't go to Paris. Paris is not France. It's good that you're not in Paris. Meanwhile, we were on our way to Paris, but here we are. But I think, and to be clear, I love Paris. I think Paris is one of the most beautiful, incredible cities in the entire world. And that's why I've been here probably like 20 times by now. But I think Nantes is a better experience for the quote unquote French experience, because it's not such a touristy city. Like there are other French tourists who go there, occasionally international tourists, but you are going to just hear more French. You'll run into people who don't speak English as much, and like I mentioned earlier with like globalization and stuff, you may encounter a Starbucks in Nantes now, but it's still a bit more sort of like protected from the encroachment of globalization in general than a city like Paris. And I think that's true of, almost every major city, right? Like if you were going to the US and you wanted to get the real American experience, New York is an American experience, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's like emblematic of the entire country. Like you might want to, go out to the countryside or a smaller town to kind of get the feel of like what the US is outside of New York.
Yeah, a fair point. Is there, or no, what is the single overhyped French stereotype that if you could, you'd like to get rid of?
Oh, like stereotypes on
that the French do,
people.
or about the French?
Let me think. Oh, there are so many.
That needs to be retired.
Yeah, there are so many. I think I made a video about that once, like all the untrue French stereotypes. But I would just say maybe like the shaving one, I think is very weird. Like there's a stereotype that like French women never shave their armpits or like their legs or something. I even knew an American girl who was like studying abroad in France, and she stopped shaving her armpits and her legs because she was here. She's like, I'm embracing the experience. I'm like, meanwhile, I don't think I know like a single French woman who's not, and that's okay. Like you don't have to shave your armpits if you don't want to, but I wouldn't say it's like the whole country is just not shaving their armpits. You know what I mean?
Like you were saying, the French are going to judge. Whatever you do.
Right, yeah, whatever.
Whether it's good or bad, the French are going to judge.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because you've experienced both, would you rather, which one is harder to write a script for? Is it like musical theater or political commentary?
Oh, I mean, there's a reason I'm not doing musical theater anymore. And to be clear, I wasn't writing that anyway, but that's gotta be.
We can pretend.
Yeah. No, I was, acting in community theater as a kid. But yeah, musical theater would be way harder to write. It's what I do is clearly a lot easier and requires a lot less training and art behind it.
There's probably more than one. But we kind of touched base about that off camera as well. What's the one most American thing that you probably will never let go of?
That me?
You do. Yeah, but you.
I'm doing it right now. I'm smiling so much. Like my face is gonna hurt after this because I just don't stop smiling. I think that's one thing that will always give me away. Even when like I get so excited when French people think I'm French. It happens once in a while. After I talk for a little bit longer, they might hear my accent. But like, I love it. I can blend in enough that sometimes French people will think I'm French, but I know what will always give me away is that I will not stop smiling. I'm like, so yeah.
You mentioned another topic and another thing that you do and a lot of Americans tend to do, which is around like being a busy bee.
Yes. Very true.
Do you think this is something you could give up?
Yeah, no, couldn't give it up. Sorry, I was saying yes, as in that's another one that I just can't give up. It's so hard for me. Like, I feel like no matter what period of my life I'm in, like I was like this in high school, in college, and now, like I just have such a full schedule. I'll go kind of like from thing to thing. Like even right now, it's like I'm working full time, I'm a content creator, and I'm doing my master's and traveling like, 6-8 times a year. I'm just like, I can't stop. There's something wrong with me, I think. But maybe it's just my American culture. I don't know.
Well, that might be also one of the reasons we're so, I wouldn't say obsessed, but drawn towards American people, culture, as French people. Because in a way, you're very similar. The culture, it looks very similar, but also in a way, it's very foreign. You're very business oriented. You're very friendly, at least front and stuff like this. And so it's fascinating.
Yeah.
To us.
Yeah, that is something I do really like about American culture is that we have this sort of like drive and we're always like, what is the next best thing? Like why, we love entrepreneurship and we want, someone is proud of how hard they work and how many things they're doing. And at the same time, like, I think that's something that Americans love about the French and like are similarly fascinated by, as Americans, we'll be like, wow, I can't believe they'll sit down and eat for 2 hours. How can they do that? And just really like embracing a little bit slower pace, like is so nice. It, lets my heart rate go down a little bit, just strolling to the grocery store, not needing to rush at a super high speed. And we love that when we come to France and just enjoy ourselves for longer.
It reminds me of a fun anecdote. We were, I helped an American chef move to France, and he invited me in a fancy restaurant he was cooking for. And so we were there with my wife. And, well, at some point towards dessert, I was starting to kind of speed up a bit because I was like, okay, well, we've been there for a while. And she was like, well, why are you speeding up? I was like, we have time. I was like, no, we've been there for 3 hours, honey. and for her, I was like, no, we have time. I was like,
that's fine.
Well, but I mean, even for me, I'm French.
Yeah,
we're like,
yeah.
That's 3 hours.
Yeah.
But that was funny because, like, even for me, that was starting to be long. But like, she was like, oh well, no, we have time. I was like, okay.
Exactly. And like, meanwhile, in the US, sometimes you'll go to a restaurant and there'll be like a little sign on the table and it'll be like 90-minute limit. Or you make your reservation and it will tell you like your table is only for 2 hours maximum because they don't want anyone staying longer than 2 hours. And yet most people are out in like less than an hour. So,
well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I could go on and on because there's so many things we could say. But we try to keep those short. So before I wrap it all up, if people want to connect with you, follow you, so where can they find you?
Well, if you want to follow me and you aren't already, my name is Roya Fox, and you can find me at Roya Aventurera, which is confusing because that's Spanish for adventurous, like an adventurous woman. But yeah, I hope to see you there.
Thank you, Roya. I'll make sure to put the link in the description. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what was Roya's spot-on insight you loved the most. And obviously, we'll see you in the next episode.